My name is Ilaria Chan. I'm the Group Advisor for Tech and Social Impact for Grab. Welcome everyone to our today's Grab Conversation session. Grab Conversation series is where tech industry players, government and thought leaders come together to discuss issues, exchange ideas on how we can advance the tech agenda for Southeast Asia and leverage societies. Now today our topic is about the gig economy, which is a highly complex and at times controversial one due to both the immense opportunities created, but also the gaps. While the economy has become a lifeline for many in Southeast Asia, it is not without a share of concerns. A February 2021 report by the International Labour Organization identifies 4 groups of issues: inequality and digital divide, power and control of platforms, data and privacy issues, and competitive and antitrust issues. Now, global discussions on the gig economy, including its potential regulatory responses and approaches, have at times been driven out of context, unfortunately. Relatively less attention has been given to how exactly these issues may play out in other contexts that are markedly different. We aim to demystify some of these issues through the lens of Southeast Asia. Now, without further ado, let's hear from Grab's co-founder, Hui-Ling Tan, on this. Over to you, Ling.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special Grab Conversation session in partnership with the International Labour Organization. First and foremost, I'd really like to thank ILO for their partnership on this event and our panelists for taking the time to be part of this important discussion. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. So today, let me first explain why Grab has organized a discussion on the gig economy. Informal work or casual gigs are not new to our societies. Freelance workers have long existed in industries like agriculture, construction, manufacturing, music, and the arts. The emergence of the gig economy, though, is more recent, and it is a phenomenon that has been accelerated by rapid digitalization and enabled by platform companies like Grab that create marketplaces at scale. The gig economy will become a key feature of the future of work. In 2020 alone, 81 million jobs were lost in Asia Pacific due to COVID-19. This is according to ILO. And we've seen from the pandemic how digital platforms continue to provide livelihoods, help small businesses reach customers, and ensure uninterrupted services for consumers. While the gig economy has become a lifeline for many in Southeast Asia, it is not without its share of concerns. Another report from the ILO from February 2021 identifies 4 groups of issues. 1, inequality and digital divide. 2, gig workers' rights and voices. 3, data and privacy issues. And 4, competitive and antitrust issues. So Grab is partnering with ILO on this event to kickstart conversations on the gig economy. And it aims to define the Southeast Asian perspective on the gig economy and also explore areas of subsequent research and partnership, targeting evidence gaps and possible regulatory approaches as well. Now, very importantly, we may not find all the answers to these questions today, but it is important to find common ground to chart the way forward. So on average, informal employment accounts for up to 77% of total employment across the region. This is from a 2018 report by ILO as well. Southeast Asia needs to carefully balance flexibility and access to work, ensure that platform companies are sustainable sources of livelihood, and support gig work that is fair, transparent, and empowering. The way forward should be tailored to the requirements of individual countries, taking into account the distinct contexts, priorities, and role of gig work in each market. So with all of this, we need dialogue, debate, and research to understand impact in a complex region like Southeast Asia. The ecosystem should help gig workers leverage what is distinctive about the gig economy while helping to mitigate the risks associated with this sort of work. And in Southeast Asia, this is very much still a work in progress. Early discussions like today's will help companies, policymakers, and international organizations identify areas of further investigation and inform future collaboration. And to achieve this vision, we are keen to partner with governments and other stakeholders to explore how best practices can be developed across the industry. Ultimately, a sustainable gig economy would uplift and create win-win outcomes for all those who tap on it, while considering the diversity of our region and tailoring to their specific needs. This includes gig workers, platforms, customers, and businesses. And broader collaboration and partnership are essential to achieving this vision. So thank you to everyone today for helping us to kickstart the journey. And thank you for listening, and I wish you all a fruitful conversation.
Thank you so much, Ling. There's just so much to dive deeper into, which is why I am privileged to introduce our next speaker, Umarani, who is an expert on this topic. Umarani is the senior economist at the research department of the International Labor Organization. She is a development economist and has conducted research in informal economy, minimum wages, and social policies. Now, since 2016, her research focuses on transformations in the digital economy, where she explores how labor and social institutions interact with public policies and can provide decent working conditions to workers. She has recently coordinated the publication of the ILO flagship report, World Employment and Social Outlook 2021, the role of digital labor platforms in transforming the world of work. Now, Uma, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion and for your kind words.
It's our pleasure. Now let's jump right in because there's just so much to get through and you really are an expert on this topic. There is increasing popularity of digital labor markets, digital labor platforms. In your opinion, what is the distinctive thing about platform business model and what are the changes that these platforms are really bringing to the world of work?
I think what is very important to understand is that digital labor platforms are actually able to leverage some of the distinctive features of the digital economy. Like, you can talk about asset lightness, the network effects, the datafication and mobility that not only allows them to operate globally across multiple jurisdictions from any location, like you do have Grab, that is based somewhere and operates in a number of other countries. And it doesn't matter where your clients or workers or consumers are based. And I think this distinctiveness is what makes digital labor platforms very distinct within the digital economy and how they are actually changing work practices and landscapes. Now, what are they changing? Actually, what they are changing is fundamentally the way human resource management practices that were there in the traditional labor market. That's undergoing a huge change because you're able to use the ICT-enabled data-driven mechanism and rely on algorithmic management practices, whether you're talking about allocating work, like, you are allocating a driver, the ride, or an order if you're talking about a delivery worker. And you're able to evaluate the work based on a number of metrics, whether it is ratings or other things, and you can also monitor them through digital tools. So I think this is fundamentally a big change in the mode of management that you actually see. The second, which is very interesting to see, is the way the organization of work itself undergoes a change, where the responsibility of investing in capital assets or the operation costs are actually shifted on from a firm to the worker. One might argue that in the informal economy, some of this existed, but I think this gets further reinforced. But when you look at some of the work that is done by freelancers, a firm would have provided a computer, but today a freelancer has to provide himself or herself a computer, and then you also sort of have to bear all the operating costs of fuel, electricity, internet, and all of it. The third fundamental change, at least from the perspective of the ILO, is that how the platforms are actually creating a dual labor market with a core workforce of workers who are directly employed by the platform, while you have a large outsourced workforce whose employment relationship is often not clear, and they are often categorized as self-employed or independent contractors and do not really get any work-related benefits or social protection. So, there's duality that gets created, and many of these workers are regulated by the terms of service agreement of the platforms, which are unilaterally determined, and they determine also the workplace protection and entitlements to a large extent. And final thing that I'd like to highlight is the way the revenue model of these platforms actually operate itself. So there's a lot of revenue that is generated by these platforms, either through commission fees or datafication in a process. And, charging workers a commission fee from the earnings that they have earned is a fundamental change, which is also in some sense contrary to the ILO Private Employment Agency Convention, which actually prohibits temporary agencies, employers, and intermediaries from charging any sort of fees. So these are, according to me, some of the fundamental changes that we see, and we do highlight that in the report.
Got it. Wow, that was a lot of really condensed good stuff there. I love how you talk about the duality too, and how unusual certain things are, and that opens up the whole complexity of it. So you recently coordinated a flagship ILO report, congratulations, by the way, on digital platforms. And you've done a number of surveys from platform workers hearing from their voice directly. What do the findings reveal with regard to opportunities and challenges? And I guess after that, do you mind commenting if you notice differences among regions?
Yeah, one of the richness of the report is the surveys that we actually did across the world. We have done about online web-based platforms in about 100 countries, and in 10 countries we have conducted taxi and delivery workers. Now, the platforms have been existing largely because there's a demand for it. So, you have diverse types of businesses, from startups to Fortune 500 companies, who are increasingly relying on online web-based platforms to access a global pool of skilled workers with diverse types of skills to reduce costs and improve efficiency, sometimes even for recruitment purposes, or to access knowledge and innovation. So, there's a huge potential that businesses do see from these platforms. And similarly, in location-based platforms, very clearly you do find that businesses in restaurants or retail sectors have been able to expand their customer base and profits. And I think the past year with COVID-19 has further reinforced some of it. They do also provide potential employment and income generating opportunities for workers, especially women. Let me take the case of Southeast Asia, which is actually quite interesting to see. And if you look at the numbers, it's quite different. Like if you're talking about freelance platforms, you have 58% of the women who are actually engaged in it, 38% of the women in microtask. And even within taxi and delivery, this is pretty unique for Indonesia compared to all the other countries that we saw, where we found that 25% of the women are in delivery and 13% of the women in taxi. So you do see that there are opportunities for women, there are opportunities for a number of young workers, to a smaller extent for migrant workers in this particular region. While there are these opportunities, and many of them are also motivated to work on these platforms, either because of freedom and flexibility that it provides, but also to complement income because they are not able to get it from other sources. And also there's not enough employment opportunities that are there. So these are reasons that are there. But one needs to also keep in mind that much of the work that is being done today, whether it's in the taxi sector or in the delivery sector or the freelance sector or the microtasking, actually they exist in the traditional labor market. It's not that they were not there. So what technology or platform companies are doing is they're improving labor market efficiency by actually mediating and exchanging between the worker and the client or the customer. I think this is something we all need to keep in mind as we get into this discussion. Now, having said that, there are a number of challenges. And I think one of the challenges that we do see very clearly is earnings. The earnings are quite low. And if you start comparing it with other parts of the world, in the developing South, they range somewhere depending upon the, because we haven't adjusted for purchasing power parity, so you cannot really compare, and it is also incorrect to compare. But one can do a comparison on online web-based platforms with developed countries, where we find that Southeast Asian countries and other developing countries earn about 60% less than that of developed workers. I think this is an issue we need to have in mind. And the other fact that you need to keep in mind is that these are very highly educated workers on online web-based platforms. So, the issue is this also the way we want to push when we are talking about highly educated workers moving towards formality? This is not really low-end, low-skilled workers that you're talking about. This is a completely different breed that is there. Whereas when you come down to location-based platforms, you do find that workers earn around $1.7 per hour, and 50% of the workers earn less than $1.2 per hour. But then, the number of working hours in this particular region is quite high. You find that 50% of the workers work for about 72 hours per week. That's almost close to double. And the average working hours are about 69 hours. Now, why is this actually happening? I think this is very important for us to understand. Part of it is a gamification process that is actually employed through bonuses and incentives, and workers try to reach these limits so that they can avail many of these bonuses and benefits. The second issue that I do want to raise is, as mentioned before, algorithmic management practices are important in this process. And within that, ratings become very decisive for you to access work. Now, what we have seen is there's a lot of talk about flexibility and freedom to work. Now, the flexibility and freedom to work would mean that I have the power and the control to accept or cancel rights and orders, right? But what we have seen from the surveys is largely that about 82% of the workers said that they cannot cancel or accept rights without repercussions. And one of the biggest repercussions they face is on the ratings. A very large proportion, about 70% of them, said that their ratings are downgraded and often they are deactivated. Now, this has huge impact on the access to rights and what they can earn, even the bonuses. So, this is a sort of a vicious circle that one is getting into, and one needs to keep that in mind. Now, workers do not have enough social protection. Less than 10% of the workers actually reported saying that. So these, and then unionization, right to collective bargaining, some of the basic fundamental principles and rights at work are actually not available to the workers. So I think these are some of the concerns that we do have, which is also highlighted very much in the report.
Yes, so thank you. I mean, I was just feverishly taking notes. In fact, a lot of the very cutthroat facts does worry the public a lot. And I recall even not just gig economy or low skill work or anything, actually any skill work, right? I mean, investment bankers these days in America are complaining about exhaustion and the type of hours that you just quoted. However, the key that you mentioned that I take away is the word protection and rights too. And I think that is something that we would have to keep having a longer dialogue to on what is the appropriate level. I would love to ask you, Mo, what does the report identify as the top priority for action at the international level, whether it is by the ILO or other international regulators?
I think based on the findings that we've had, and as I have mentioned to you, the report goes about giving 15 recommendations, and it does call for a global social dialogue and regulatory cooperation between digital platform, labor platform companies, the platform workers, and the governments. But fundamentally, what it goes about arguing is that irrespective of how the worker is defined, what the employment status is, the universal application of all the labor standards and fundamental principles and rights at work would be very important. Having said that, I think the top 3 priorities, if you would like me to lay down for you, would be
Yes, please.
ensuring that workers' employment status is actually correctly classified, taking into consideration the whole issues around control and autonomy of work. And these have to be in accordance with the national classification systems and to ensure that the workers receive all work-related benefits and social protection. The second one is related to ensuring adequate social security benefits for all platform workers, independently from their employment status. You can extend, adapt policy and legal frameworks where necessary and work with governments to ensure that this is provided. Finally, I think the third and fundamental thing, which is something missing at the moment, is ensuring fair termination process, because workers can be deactivated at any time for no rhyme or reason, no explanations provided, and that means that you have no access to work. And as a traditional labor market does not really exist, as many of the platform companies are taking over, it has huge ramifications on the livelihoods of the workers. So I think there is a need to ensure fair termination processes, and there has to be more transparency and accountability of algorithms for workers.
That was very rich. Thank you so much, Uma, today. I wish we had more time, but I think we would love to share with the audience the link or any source to be able to read your report as well, as I think the whole world right now is looking at this issue. Thank you so much for your valuable insights today, Uma. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Now, next for everybody, we have 2 exciting panels coming up, with the first panel addressing gig economy in Southeast Asia's context, moderated by myself. And the second panel will seek to identify shared outcomes and will be moderated by Sarah Elder from the ILO. So right now, let me introduce all the wonderful speakers and moderator today. Let's start with the first panel speakers, Lim Yu-Hang. So Yu-Hang is the Group Managing Director for Public Affairs at Grab, leading the teams and regional efforts across public policy, strategic relations, policy advocacy, and public-private sector partnerships. Now, prior to Grab, Yu-Hang spent 14 years in management consulting, and he was the MD and partner at Boston Consulting Group, known as BCG as well, where he led the topic of Industry 4.0 across Asia Pacific. And he also ran BCG's Innovation Center of Operations in Singapore. Yu-Hang began his career in Singapore government in the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Environment. Next, we have Pandu Sharir. Now, Pandu is one of Southeast Asia's leading investors in the seed and early growth stages. He's a managing partner of Indies Capital. Pandu also serves as a chairman of Indonesia for C Group, a leading Southeast Asian tech company, the board member of Gojek, one of Indonesia's first unicorn tech companies, and the director of Toba Bara, a leading publicly listed energy enterprise in Indonesia. Pandu also serves in multiple organizations to promote entrepreneurship and education in Southeast Asia. He is the head of energy in Indonesia's Chamber of Commerce, a board member of Endeavor, which is a global nonprofit organization for entrepreneurs, and is a chairman for Stanford University's Alumni Association in Indonesia and the Phillips Academy Alumni Association. Next, we have Trevor Sworn. Trevor originally is from England, but has lived in Cambodia for more than 21 years. From 2011 to the present time, Trevor is the co-founder and executive director at Enduring Education Consultancy, specializing in education, vocational training, migration, employment, research, and organizational development in both private and public sectors. And Trevor is also on the board of the Cambodian Federation of Employers and an active part of the TVET subcommittee, interacting with government and global donors such as ILO. He's also on the board of the British Chamber of Commerce. We also have Adrian Tan, who is the strategist for future work at the Institute of Human Resource Professionals. Adrian was a serial entrepreneur in the recruitment, career search, and HR consultancy space, leading to 2 HR Vendors of the Year awards, SHRI HR Entrepreneur Award and Global Recruiter's Best Marketing Award. Adrian is one of the top global influencers in the HR tech space by AI HR, and he writes extensively about the future of work on his blog and is the creator of Singapore HR Tech Market Map. He also interviews future of work enablers on his podcast, The Adrian Time Show, and is a frequent contributor to Channel News Asia. Now, session 2 will be moderated by Sarah Elder, who is a senior economist and head of Regional Economic and Social Analysis Unit in ILO's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. Sarah spent 5 years as Chief Tech Advisor on the ILO Work for Youth project and more than 10 years working in the area of labor market information and analysis in the Employment Trends Unit. She has written extensively on issues on labor market transitions of young people, labor market, and employment trends. And speaker-wise, in session 2, we'll also have Dr. Noor Aslan Ghazali. Now, Tan Sri Noor Aslan is a professor of economics at UKM Graduate School of Business. He is a member of the Economic Action Council and currently the executive director of the Secretariat of EAC. He was the vice chancellor of UKM from 2014 to 2018. He is a Mason Fellow of Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and also a Commonwealth Fellow of Financial Economics and Banking of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. Tan Sri is also honored as a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, also conferred with honorary professor of economics by the University of Sabarjaya, Malaysia, for his contribution to Malaysia's economic development. He received Distinguished Civilian Service Award for 2020 and was also a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Malaysia from 2015 to 2019. He currently serves at the National Development Planning Council. Professor Aslan will be joined by Yu Heng Lim as speakers in session 2. So, wow, I mean, I'm just so impressed by all our speakers. Thank you for taking time to join us today on this exciting topic. Now, to kick off session 1, much of the debate around the gig economy has taken place in North America now and Europe, driven by the sharp increase in on-demand work gigs delivered through the digital platforms. A lot of the discussion centers on gig worker protections and the obligations of government to ensure that this industry is appropriately regulated, which just now we also heard from Uma are top of her concerns as well. In Southeast Asia, the gig economy has actually similarly grown very quickly. With debates over worker protections emerging in this region, we actually need to consider, in light of all these unique aspects to gig work in Southeast Asia, relating to 2 areas. One is the characteristic of alternative work. If the gig workers, were not having these jobs, what would they hold? And also the context of labor market governance in countries where the informal economy prevails. So a lot of things to unpack. Why don't we start with Yu Heng? Yu Heng, from your perspective, from a gig platform tech company, how have gig economy platforms evolved in the region, you think? And how has this really helped to address the existing economic or labor market challenges for the workers you have engaged with?
Well, thank you. Can you guys hear me well? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, as mentioned earlier, I think gig work is not really been new, right? It's been around for a while, especially in Southeast Asia, where much of the economy has been informal. The personal story was my dad used to be a gig worker. He was a construction worker in Singapore, and he would go to the coffee shop, downstairs, and wait for work to come. And sometimes he would get employed for a few days to paint a house, and other times not, right? And I think what technology has done is really kind of make that coffee house where the 20 gig workers gather to a 5 million one, right? Which is the size of the platform that we have created in Southeast Asia. And I think that has created a lot of access, and with access comes also better income certainty. And what is also, I think, helpful is, I think in Southeast Asia, what has also happened is we have seen a persistent class of people that were kept out of the digital economy. And we like to think that gig economy has been one way where we could get people on board, right? One number is 1.5 million of our partners on the Grab platform has opened a bank account for the very first time, right? And you know, bank account is it's a start to much more social and financial inclusion. So I think that's all these benefit that we are seeing in what I still think are early years of the gig economy in Southeast Asia. And if you think about, if you pull it up one level to think about what's the impact on economies, I think the labor market in Southeast Asia, especially the formal one, have been quite rigid in some aspect. You see, you know, companies kind of not really wanting to employ full-time employees because of all the cost that comes associated with that. And that's one thing. So that results in a lot of informal workforce. The other thing is that the economic cycles are getting faster and faster and shorter, and the pandemic is really one good example. And there's a lot of disruption to the labor market. And we like to think that the gig economy is one way in which you can kind of lubricate that transition. You know, as people go from jobs to job that cuts across different sectors and the need to retrain, gig economy can be a stopgap. The other thing which Uma mentioned is economic inclusion, where we've seen data that shows that a lot of people choose the platform, right? 70% choose the platform for flexibility, meaning autonomy. And that means a lot of more women, a lot more retirees could get onto the platform. And that's really driving the economy. These people will then also pay taxes. It also helps government. And so we also see that economy inclusion perspective. So there's a lot of good stuff. And I think we can sometimes get too excited about the positive side of it, but there's also a lot of issues, and I wouldn't repeat all the issues that Uma was mentioning. It certainly are issues which is there in Southeast Asia as well, and I don't think we are right now at the space where, in the evolution, we're kind of at the space where it can be sustainable. There's still a lot to be fixed. We're part of the actors that can fix this problem, but we can't do it alone. And kind of that's why this conversation is really important. And we'd love to hear from other panelists on the issues and some ideas on how we can jointly solve them.
Correct. That's really good. Thank you. And I love the word autonomy, because I think later on we will also explore this because people do choose gig work for that reason. And I think we're definitely not going to skim on the challenges. So thank you, Yuhan, for your contribution. Let's move on to Trevor. Trevor, you wear many hats, and very impressively, you're an Englishman that has spent over 2 decades in Cambodia. In your view, what challenges and opportunities has the growth of gig economy platforms created for the labor market?
Thanks, Ilaria. Yeah, I just want to set the context here so that the viewers are aware. We have a very young country, age 50% under the age of 26 years old, and many young people coming out of schools, coming of school age, and more than 25% haven't completed high school. So we have a big challenge here with a workforce coming through who has low skills. And since the COVID epidemic, we've seen more than 90% drop in tourism numbers, and also more than 150,000 garment factory workers laid off. So there's a lot of challenges within the economy. It's not all negative, but these are some of the challenges that are there. So we see that the opportunities that gig working platform economy provides is a low skill and low cost entry into the market with a smartphone and a 3-wheeler tuk-tuk. They can enter the market and they can start earning money. And many young people are the breadwinners in their family. And those who have been affected by the COVID pandemic have been able to move into the platform economy as delivery drivers, as tuk-tuk and taxi drivers. There isn't a lot of Airbnb or other ones. It's primarily just those. But it's given them an opportunity. Previously to this, we had the motorbikes with the carriage behind it that was pulling along, no digital support at all, and very disorganized, and they would just wait outside places, hoping that people come out and they would try and hire them. Now the digital platforms have given them the opportunity to be able to manage that and to be efficient and productive with their time. So this is a very positive step in that. And again, this is an area where the options come in for they can work flexible hours, as Yu Heng said, and they have opportunities to have maybe more than one income. So they have it could be a supplementary income from the main income as well. So there's lots of opportunities there as well.
Thank you so much. And in many ways, I also love how you set context for us in terms of the challenges, because Cambodia has a very young population because it also went through a lot in the 70s. And what you also mentioned in the sharp drop in tourism shows also the vulnerability of the country to this sharp drop, whereas I think some countries may suffer a little less when COVID hit in terms of tourism. But all in all, I think the skill level is important too. And I would love to revisit that later on as we move forward with the conversation. Thank you so much, Trevor. Now, the next question I would love to direct to both Trevor, so stay on with us, and Adrian. This is really about the expansion in the number of people wanting to join platform work. So I just wonder if you guys have really seen a sharp expansion in the number of people wanting to join platform work, and why are they attracted by the opportunity to join the platform? And I guess give us a little bit of an idea of the background of some of the gig workers that you interact with or represent. I know, Trevor, just now you have covered some of it, but maybe if you have any additional comment on the expansion, the level of expansion, and any additional points on how attractive this opportunity for people, please feel free to supplement. Why don't we start with Trevor first, and then we'll move to Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Ilaria. Going back to the ease of access and entry into the work, many from the tourist sector have moved in, but before that, we saw a huge rise in the number of tuk-tuk drivers in 2015 through down to 2018. More than 20,000 new taxi drivers and tuk-tuk drivers came into the market. And this is a great opportunity for also customers, because they know fixed prices on the platform, and they know that, for example, with Grab, you know the driver, you even get asked questions during the trip, whether everything's going okay. And all this is great for the consumers. And so this is what's drawn lots of people to it. When COVID hit, we had the lockdowns like many countries, and we saw a huge rise in delivery drivers. And many people in red zones and amber zones in the city were actually cut off and really relied on them for getting food and drink and other things. So this was a very vital service to provide. And they had special passes, which I believe the platforms were helping them get, so that they were able to move around the city and go through the police roadblocks and the military roadblocks into those areas and move around. So again, it's been a very out of a very difficult situation. There's some very positive points there.
Got it. No, thank you so much, Adrian.
So I've actually written a few articles regarding gig worker, and I think it broadly fall into a few categories. The first one would be for people who may be out of work, and going into the gig workforce may be not just an easier way, but in fact a more profitable option as well. I can give you an example. So when I was in the outplacement industry, we were trying to get this guy who was a process engineer back into the workforce. He was maybe picking up about 2.5K per month. And we thought, okay, entry-level salary, we should be able to place him quite easily. 6 months later, we are still struggling to place him. And the reason is because he was telling us with the same amount of time that he can spend, he could easily earn double of that just doing gig work. So that's one category. Of course, the other category would be for people who just prefer to get a flexibility of time. Even just for myself, I personally have been a gig worker before. And one of the key reasons is because I needed that time with my kids. I want to send them to school, pick them up, bring them to a playground, and really try to have that as my key priority. So that is also something that's happening for many people as well. And I think the third group, and this may not be a big group, but it is still quite significant, which is for people who may not be able to get into the normal workforce. One of the lady that I did my research on was this lady who actually is she actually has physical disability, so she's in a wheelchair, and she struggled to really get any form of work. In the office, in admin, anything. And that happened for many, many years. And only when gig work started to become more prevalent, she signed up. And there's no discrimination there. As long as you're able to deliver the outcome, you're in, join us. So she's very happy that she can gain independence. And I think most importantly, a sense of dignity as well as the self-reliance, because she's also confident that she can take care of herself and also give her parents the ease of mind as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In fact, I think seeing some of the firsthand stories of people with disability being able to reinvent themselves and find gig work in areas where traditional people wouldn't expect them to do, and they thrive. I remember actually there was a deaf driver on the Grab platform that consistently gets top rating, and it's just one of the most moving things to see people dignified by work like that. I also love the article you wrote. So if anyone wants to read some of these articles that Adrian has written, go into his LinkedIn, Google him. I really enjoy the part you highlight about work-life balance. I think especially after COVID, everyone will identify with that part, needing to spend time with family and the flexibility that gig work offers. So you also mentioned, obviously, that you spend time as a gig worker, as an Uber driver. Would you mind telling us just a little bit about how you decided to, do that switch? Because I know you've been an HR professional for a long time. What was the reason that you made that switch at that time to take up gig work as an Uber driver?
There's a couple of reasons. One, of course, is to spend more time with my kids. And I think the second of all was, to be honest, at that point in time, I was struggling to find formal employment. So I thought it's an ideal opportunity for me to give it a try. And back then, I would say the barrier of entry was much easier. There was no PDVL. This was quite many years ago. So it's very easy to get into the market and to give it a go.
Right. Well, you are definitely a Singapore specialist. So I would like to zoom in on a Singapore specific view. Going back to looking at the main opportunities and challenges, right? In your view, what are the main opportunities and challenges of gig workers right now in Singapore?
I think it will fall into two categories. One will be competition, the other one will be regulation. Competition, we probably could go back a few years ago when private hire drivers first come into the market. And if you still remember, taxi drivers was banding together, creating some form of ruckus, nuisance, just trying to chase them away. And it just seems just like yesterday. So those are the kind of things that may happen when people feel that you might be entering into their territory or their turf and trying to take away their rice bowl. But I think most significantly is, and on the competition side, I think end of the day, market demand will take care of it. But most significantly is really on the regulation side. I mean, when I first started, there's no PDVL, and I've never done delivery, but I've seen cases where, and I've seen, actual facts where, you can no longer use certain vehicle and you have to comply by certain things, this and that. And of course, all this makes it very, very challenging. Even for private hire drivers, I understand they have made some adjustment to the minimum age. So if I was younger back then, I couldn't even get into this sector. So those are the key things that is happening. And I think progressively, we are also seeing other institution or association trying to, draw contrast between gig workers and formal employment, and the fact that, gig worker, you don't get the protection that you need, you don't get medical benefits, blah, 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 those kind of stuff. In a way, trying to unionize the entire thing. But the way I look at it, and being a previous gig worker myself, that is not our key priority. We just want first livelihood to flexibility of time. If we indeed want to have all these benefits and all that, we will not even consider gig work to begin with. So, but still, I think over time, and we have seen in the case of UK for Uber, that definitely has created a huge disruption to the way they operate business. And all this cost eventually will have to be passed back to someone, and customers will be the one that will have to suffer.
Right. No, you've opened a lot of cans just now, and I wish we could open all of them. But let's try as we wrap. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much. Now let's shift gears a little bit. Let's follow the trail of the money, since nothing really operates in this world properly without the support of capital. So Pandu, what role do large investors and platform companies play in shaping the way that their portfolio companies act in the gig economy?
Thanks, Hilaria, and thanks for staying up so late for you.
Pleasure.
Hi, nice to meet everyone here. Nice to meet you. So I think, the development of gig economy, and I think capital, private capital in this case, that have been fueling the growth of technology. I would say the technology, don't forget, these gig economy comes from sharing economy, and essentially it's technology that fuels this, right? So companies on the basis of technology. So obviously Grab is one of the platforms that have been growing this. I see there's more positives overall. And the reason being is very simple, okay? And I think this COVID also is a very good reminder to all of us. In all of the country that, I think all of us where everyone lives and where I live in Indonesia, for a country to fulfill its economic potential, we want to be able to all the productive people to also become productive member of society, right? And, maybe in Singapore, the case is a bit different than in Indonesia. I mean, obviously Singapore itself, just population-wise, is relatively small, right? So if you look at Indonesia, the biggest employer outside of Jakarta, for example, are government, right? So what we need, and especially now with COVID, are actual jobs, right? So what does technology do, right? What technology does, allow people to create from idle time to become productive time. Simple as that. If they're able to do that, you can have more economic output. And if you can have more economic output, hopefully you can have more opportunities. And technology allows the everyday people to have that ability. I think what Adrian's story suggests, what Yuhang's story suggests, what Trevor's story suggests are quite consistent also in this part of the world in Indonesia. So I see it's more of the positive result of it. Obviously, in more developed countries, the discussion become deeper about rights, about the ability to let go, etc. But for countries that are growing very fast, like in Indonesia, the big challenges, and especially due to COVID, is how to create more employment. And technology companies are able to do that. People today are shifting in Indonesia. In the last 1 year, we have almost more than 10 million small medium enterprise, and the small medium enterprise in Indonesia are small. These are companies that are probably doing less, on average about 30,000 or less Singapore dollars, right? And they are moving from offline to online. That's 1.5 Singapore that moved in the last 12 months, right? So it's significant, right? And then later on, I think the next story will be how technology companies can help them through financial services to provide credit, lending, right? There was a story also, Yuhang says that, hey, there's now new people that actually sign up to have bank accounts, right? Because the story is actually now is moving to get the unbanked, quote unquote, to become the underbanked. The next challenge will go from the underbanked to become bankable. As simple as that, the narrative. Private capital have taken the biggest risk of creating these changes. Actually, this is actually a great time because as investors, we've been waiting, Ilaria, for 8 years. A lot of us invested 2013, 14. C obviously did it in 2017, and really excited about Grab's soon to be IPO. Because what it does, all these IPO will recycle capital for further development into the economy. All of that capital that are profitable will be recycled back into the ecosystem and in a more meaningful way. Why? Because essentially the last decade has shown technology in Southeast Asia works. It has strong positive impact, and it can create positive ecosystem, not just for the stakeholders, but also for shareholders. So I think that's what's going to happen. I'm so glad the success of Grab will be the success of Gojek and the success of other platforms that are right now going through this public market experience. And I think what it does the next 12 to 24 months is just the beginning of the technology sector moving upward. So that's my view, because they have taken really the biggest venture risk in the last decade.
Yes. No, I love that. And actually, I think a lot of people may have overlooked this, right? There's just forgetting that actually the investors, the financiers have put a lot of money in long-term risk too, right? Private capital VC, you actually wait a number of years before you see the fruits. But I love what you said about how capital would be recycled back into the ecosystem. It's the whole financial multiplier effect that empowers more productivity, spending power, and it grows and blooms the economy. Please stay with us, Handu, and I'll bring Yuheng back in. Let's zoom out a little bit to a slightly more macro question, because both Handu and Yuheng, you guys have quite an international lens and exposure to different countries. How unique is gig work in Southeast Asia compared to the rest of the world, in your opinion? Maybe we can start with Handu and then Yuheng.
Yeah, I think the gig economy, or even the informal economy, is a significant part for Indonesia. I mean, I guess I can comment Indonesia because I live here, been operating here. It's actually a significant part. And I think what technology can do will actually enlarge the overall economic system, because one, you'll get people to be registered as taxpayers. You'll get people to be able to be part of the credit cycle, right? Because a lot of the fintech movement now is the ability to provide credit to small, medium enterprises and to grow that part of the business. And third, I would say it actually should increase productivity among the SMEs. Right, because I think the biggest engine of growth for Indonesia today will be the SMEs. So I would say gig economy. I mean, essentially all the merchants in Grab are doing quote unquote gig economy that becomes full time. Right, they are their own employer. Right, all the sellers in all these different platforms, that's what they are. And I think they're moving from becoming. I mean, gigs sometimes are considered like part time, right, where you kind of measure your own time. But for them, this gig has become a full-time gig for them, right? So they have become turning from a what is it called, part-time, into a full-time entrepreneur. You're essentially growing new entrepreneurs, right? So for me, I think it's super exciting, and COVID really has pushed technology firms and technology at least 3 to 4 years ahead, in my view. So that's
in your words, it's really the evolution. Basically, in Southeast Asia, the gig work is not really in a box. It actually expands and changes itself. It's kind of like a caterpillar to butterfly scenario, where it becomes part-time, becomes full-time, becomes a livelihood, becomes financial inclusion, becomes productivity. And I think that compared to the rest of the world, especially developed economies, it's a big difference.
It's a different story. I agree.
Wonderful. Yuheng, any views on how unique gig work is in Southeast Asia compared to the rest of the world?
Well, I think first there's quite a bit of similarity in the sense that it's growing really fast. But as Pandu mentioned, I think Southeast Asia, first, there is really no Southeast Asia in the sense that Southeast Asia is very diverse, right? And even Indonesia is very diverse. It's many mini economies with very different characteristics. And so I think what is consistent, however, is the challenges that the opportunity, yes, we've talked about it, but also the challenges that, despite it being Singapore versus, say, Cambodia, I think the challenges are very similar, even though the solutions might be very different, right? We talk about the need to protect autonomy, flexibility. We talk about financial security. we talk about, professional development. The gig economy is maybe a 5-10 years phenomenon in Southeast Asia. But if you look 20, 30, 40 years ahead, you will start to see, hey, maybe there's a bunch of people that's going to be on the gig economy for the entire career. They just kind of move from different gigs, different platforms. And for those people, what about their retirement needs? Maybe they don't think about it if it's a half a year gig, but if they do it for the next 30 years, it will be an issue. What about their professional development, right? We talk about fair work conditions. How do we design fair work conditions that is grounded on what's really happening, right? If you take what might make sense in Europe and try to put it in Southeast Asia, maybe it doesn't make sense. And so what I feel that Southeast Asia is very diverse, and the gig profile of partners are also very different. I do think that the challenges and their kind of protection requirements are actually quite similar. And so we need to align kind of on those challenges and find solutions that work for each of the country and each of the segments within the gig economy. And that, I think, would be the challenge, which is to align ourselves on the challenges, but then to make sure that we avoid one size fits all solution for Southeast Asia.
I like that. Challenges similar, solutions different. I think one of the first things that I was shocked when I first moved to Singapore and got exposed to Southeast Asia is that, people like to lump Southeast Asia together as one kind of massive region, but every country is so different, like crazy different. And I think unless people have actually been on the ground and, been to Indonesia and then went to Thailand and then went to Vietnam and then went to Cambodia, it is hard to really understand how different the countries are. So I really like that, what you suggested, Yuhang. Okay, wow. Time passes very quickly. I guess we're now finally at our final question. We'll do a lightning round, just one sentence, but very important question. So I would love to ask all panelists, what do you expect to see regarding the development of gig work in the future? Let's start with Adrian, and then Pandu, and then Yuhang, and then Trevor.
For me, I hope it could be expanded into much more different scope. Right now, we are seeing gig work. I know it's going beyond a sentence, but right now we're seeing gig work just in very limited areas. I hope more people would be able to bring that across to different functions, like web design, marketing, anything at all, and really try to really have a different approach when it comes to work, where it's more of something that I want to do, and once I'm out, I can go into something else. So taking a more of a tour of duty kind of approach to work, rather than expecting the iron rice bowl kind of concept, contract versus perm job, those kind of thing. And I think that will help to create more flexibility, and most importantly, more happiness for people, because work usually is one of the key things that makes people unhappy.
Wow, you spoke a handful there. Thank you, Adrian. Pandu.
Yeah, I think gig, at least in the business that we operate in the companies we invest in, I think there's going to be exponential growth, where a lot of new people, young people in Indonesia will be involved in this gig economy, and I think it will have a strong positive impact the development of Indonesia.
Thank you, Pandu. Yuhang?
I'd like to take a view from the gig worker, right? I mean, I think we are really at the beginning. What would be the future will be that for the gig entrepreneur, the gig worker, his opportunity to earn livelihood explodes over time, right? I mean, if you think about the taxi driver, the taxi uncle, aunties, last time, they kind of pay rent and then they need to drive to make money. Today, you look at the drivers, they are picking up passengers, they're picking up food, they're delivering parcels, they are doing mapping, geo-mapping for Grab and earning money out of it. They're running advertisements, right? And I think the opportunity for the gig workers to make a living and still have social protection and to still have flexibility and work-life balance and happiness, I think that's the future we need to be. It's not going to be the default future, because I think we need to kind of do things to influence it towards that. And that's where I think this conversation is really, really helpful. But I'm super optimistic about the future of gig work in Southeast Asia.
Great. Trevor?
Yeah, just echoing the other panelists, but in Cambodia context, it's really that we have so many young people, and this is going to provide great opportunities. They have an income, they can develop their skills, customer service skills, financial skills, financial literacy. As they grow, they can expand. And so this is very positive for the country and the future, and the opportunities that we see already coming through in other countries like Singapore and Europe. They aren't even here yet. This will be an expansion of the platforms into there. So it's very positive for us.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your contribution. In many ways, I love that you all actually skew towards positive, towards the gig economy and the prosperity and opportunities it has brought for gig workers, which may surprise people if they dial in from, California, USA, where I am currently from, where the whole tone is very different. But here is the beauty of understanding different countries and global dynamics and also geopolitically, right? We are also seeing economically, Southeast Asia is just starting to grow its middle class. And quite a few of the speakers just now mentioned about very young population. The fact that the population is so young in Vietnam and Cambodia also really changes productivity and spending pattern. And once we look at spending, what Pandu talked about, right? The power of financial inclusion, of dollars being spent back into the economy, and how does that multiplier push the domestic consumption in different countries? And that is actually a wonderful picture. Of course, we're not avoiding the topics of challenges, which I also really, really appreciate the candid comments from each panelist. Thank you all. Sorry, we have to end this panel now because we're hitting the time, but thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your insights. To reiterate, really, this is a very complex issue and we don't have answers to everything right now. This is just the first of many dialogues that we hope to convene to foster more understanding and common ground to move forward. So why don't we right now hand over the time to our seasoned thought leader in this field, Sarah Elder, senior economist from the ILO, for our next session. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. You're very kind, Ilaria. And I'd like to congratulate the first panel. It was really excellent. And welcome participants to our second panel. So I really feel like the first panel has done a really great job of helping us to understand more about the current status of the gig economy, especially in the region of Southeast Asia. It really is a complex storyline that Uma set out at the beginning. So we have to understand that, as Uma reminds us, the dynamics of work have really been revolutionized since the spread of the platform economy. And I mean, in a way, I'm not surprised by the optimism that Ilaria mentioned coming from the first panel, because it really does seem as if this gig economy is here to stay. So we might as well embrace the opportunity and move forward in a positive manner. But really, the changes have come so rapidly that we're now in a circumstance where we have governments and traditional sectors trying to grapple to keep up, and with the ultimate aim being to create now a sort of equilibrium on how the supply and the demand of labor meet in a framework of digital platforms, and fixing this in a way so that the roles and regulations can catch up and hopefully propel platform work in a way that maximizes the well-being of societies on all fronts. So we continue to have a framework where there's a lot of conflicting stakeholders in the ecosystem of the gig economy. So you have, on the one hand, gig workers who want to maximize their earnings. You have consumers that want to maximize the affordability of the services. You have platform companies that want to maximize profits. And so really, it's these sort of stakeholders that we want to concentrate on in the second panel, which is much smaller than the first panel. We unfortunately don't have so much time. We have 20 minutes to discuss. So let me be quiet and now reintroduce our second panel. Ilaria gave us an introduction in the initiative to who is joining us in the second panel. We have again Yu Hang, And we have also an additional panelist who's Professor Aslan. And Professor Aslan is a great addition because he's representing the voice of the government. He's working in the Economic Advisory Council for Malaysia, and he's also a very distinguished professor with a very wonderful CV that Ilaria shared with us. So I'm going to first start by asking Professor Aslan. So Professor Aslan, can you give me your general impression, please, of the conversation so far? Have you heard anything in the first panel, the first session that surprised you? Over to you, please.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for inviting for GRABS and ILO to organize this conversation. I've been listening very attentively from the beginning, from the first speaker, and go to the session 1 and so on. You know, I'm trying to position myself. I think you rightly said it, and I was about to say that. I'm probably the first to come out here and say that I'm coming from the government side. I mean, is this something that you welcome? Is it something that, what does it mean in terms of a nation whenever you start to see new creations of the so-called job opportunities? I think from most of the members, I think largely many are coming from the providers themselves. I mean, the platform owners and also people who are seeing, I mean, on the great opportunities that is open. I can't agree more to say that innovation is always good. I mean, we keep on seeing, you know, an expansion of opportunities, I think, for the workers as well as for the businesses. Those are all well lining up. But my things that I've yet to hear much, probably I'm the one who is to do it, is how do the government say it? I mean, this is a challenge. I think, for one thing, that from my perspective, I'm very careful about the role of government in dealing with all this. In many cases, sometimes government is so much known about coming in and stalling progress. You know, in many cases, I mean, the bureaucrats coming in and jumping with a lot of new rules and regulations as how they see things. So now, my role, I'm kind of a hybrid myself. I'm an academic. I mean, I'm also now in the Economic Action Council. I must say that the attention to gig economy is so much in Malaysia, probably, I mean, due to the pandemic. I mean, it was there before. We know that. I mean, but you have not seen it like what we are seeing now. I mean, you go on the street, you see green and pink on the street. I mean, kind of 24 hours a day, kind of. You know, so it's good. I mean, to me, I will not make much comment. I agree with all the opportunities and so on. But I would like to say that, because we were discussing this in the context of, especially to start with, in Southeast Asia, I believe that there is a contextual aspect to this. So how a government are looking at this and how to make sure that it is in line with what the nation is progressing is very important. And let me give a case of Malaysia. Yes, out of the pandemic, we are glad to see that many youngsters are now involving in this. But we are also having a serious concern about whether is this kind of a job for the future. I mean, as what we are seeing now is very much a very low-end kind of gig workers. I mean, we love gigs, but we feel like if truly that is going to fit Malaysia, we like to see that more of a high-end kind of gig workers that give a better payment and so on. But when we start to see, like in one simple survey that we did, about 47% of the so-called the gig workers in the form of riders and so on are those with diploma, those with a degree and so on. I mean, wonder whether is it really out of what one of the speakers was saying, that to find something flexi so that you can get a better living, or is it that because you couldn't get anything else? So those are problems, and we start to see that things are being pushed in Malaysia. High employment among youth, high unemployment among graduates of the colleges, the universities is a serious issue in Malaysia. And at the same time, we have huge influx of foreign workforce in the country that push out and crowd out those at the low end. So again, I'm surprised to see that a very small percentage of people with a lower end qualification, that I thought that they should be the one there, but surprisingly, you see again, they are crowding out again. So the problem that we are facing is still there. So the challenge is how to do it right, how to make sure that gig is really in line with what the country wants, and how to make sure that all those segments are being, entertained in terms of what they want. I mean, the business side, the worker side, the consumer side, as well as the government.
Yeah, that's really perfect. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head when you talk about we're just at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have all stakeholders in the room when we are when we are having this conversation. And when we talk about the quality of gig work, and you can often think of it in terms of what type of work do you want for your children? It's a very interesting issue. Do you want your children to be the gig workers, or do you want them still to be the doctors of tomorrow? And if you don't want your children to take up gig work, then who do we expect to do this work? So there's really are a lot of trade-offs that still need to be dealt with, and it's a very evolving conversation. So let's bring in Yuhang here. When we talk about these trade-offs, and I think we heard in the ILO report and in the discussion in the first panel that the gig economy still doesn't always run smoothly. And you mentioned this yourself as well, that the one area of concern remains about the conditions of work for the gig workers in terms of the long hours, sometimes dangerous conditions. Unfortunately, we were unable to get a gig worker here. But we thought it would be wonderful if you can help us to understand, as the managing director of the GRAB, what you see as some of the most frequent areas of complaints from your GRAB drivers, and share with us as well how GRAB management is trying to deal with these complaints. Thank you.
Got it. I think that maybe I'll preface it by saying that the people on the platform are incredibly diverse, right? You can imagine someone who is looking at this as a main source of income, maybe with a bit of a lower education, sees this very differently from someone who is in transition and thinking about it as a 3-month job, but sort of trying to take that time to think about the next career move. And so the concerns are very, very different, right? On our end, the way we think about it is we need to ensure some fundamentals are managed, right? First, safety. That are always concerned about, because it's flexible work. You can work as little as you want, but you could also work way more than you should, right? And we have put in place with technology some rail guards to make sure that we continue to make sure that it's safe, right? For example, we do driver fatigue monitoring. We have telematics. We make sure that they don't drive too much. We suggest that they rest, and there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot more investment in technology that we can do, and we need to continue to do that, right? So safety for us is almost the number one thing we need to always get right. And then on top of that, you have things like inclusiveness and non-discrimination, right? Where we want to make sure that as many people can use our platform as well as make livelihood out of it. We're talking about, for example, people with disability. And then there's a couple more things, right? One is transparency between drivers and platform, right? I think we need to be honest to drivers about what gig work can and cannot do. Is it a career path that goes, different steps along the way? Probably not. But can it provide you with certain income? Can it be a stepping stone? Can it allow you flexibility? Yes, it can. And I think that transparency of what it is, but also transparency of the condition of the work, and be very clear, I think that's really important. We are also thinking about the voice of the gig workers. how do we hear them? We found that kind of the traditional way of unionization is one avenue, but because the gig workforce is so complex and diverse, we find that that's inadequate, that we need to have a lot more channels in terms of engaging, listening, and understanding what they need, right? And finally, I'll talk about this topic about income, which is always a big topic, right? And that goes back to the comments where are some of the trade-offs. I think for us, in the middle of this gig economy, we need to manage the affordability of our service for consumers. We need to ensure we don't want to maximize our profit, but we need to ensure the sustainability of the platform, because without the platform, we can't serve. And so we need to be responsible for investors like Pandu to make sure that they get proper returns of investment so that they can continue to invest and take risks on this. And the next thing is, how do we ensure that we don't leave the outcome to how much? So we don't solve the maths by saying, this is how much we can charge, this is how much investors should earn, therefore this is how much gig workers can earn, right? It shouldn't be an outcome, but it should be something where we need to commit to say, this is how much we think is reasonable if the gig worker puts in the right effort should earn, right? And today, as Grab, we have the task to try to manage these different things. It's not an easy job, but it's our job, and we want to not do this alone. We need to work with government, because governments bring with them larger considerations beyond just the gig economy and can really help us guide and also regulate us. Our position is, we believe government needs to regulate the gig economy. It needs to regulate it correctly, but it needs to regulate us, and we're happy to be regulated. And we're also happy to shift this trade-off from where it is today to where we think it needs to be if it's going to be a feature of the economy for the next 50, 100 years. So it's a long answer, but I think, again, early stages, very complex. But I think government has an important role for us as well.
I think you are absolutely right, and I'm sure that Professor Aslan would agree. There has to be a role for government, and there will be a role for government. So let's turn it back to our government representative, Mr. Aslan, Professor Aslan. So you've heard a bit about some of the tensions. Yeah. We know there's still a lot of tensions in terms of how to regulate the platforms and working with the platforms to make sure that regulation makes sense and benefits consumers, benefits the workers, benefits the traditional economy players. So from your perspective, how do you think the government can get involved and to allay some of these tensions?
No, I think first of all, that government must accept the fact that this is going to stay. It's going to be there. Whether you like it or not, it's going to be there. And there will be some evolutions to it. I mean, though I try to envision that probably as we move on, we will be seeing a different kind of gig economy. At the moment, in many cases, when people talk about gig economy, I mean, gig workers, in a very plain layman term, they are looking at the e-hailers. I mean, the one who are, using their bikes and using their cars and so on. But actually, I believe that as we progress, we will be seeing a lot more. There will be a gig professors probably one day. There will be a gig doctors. There will be a lot of gig architects and so on. I mean, that part of giving that freedom and opportunities for a person to modify, the kind of adjust and accommodate working and living, I think that's fantastic. But again, I think as this is kind of a very initial conversations, because I've been interacting with a lot of platform kind of owners in Malaysia as well, and my concern is the role of government. How does government comes in? I mean, yes, glad to hear that. I think everybody believes that at the end of it, we need some form of regulations, some form of things to govern us, because there are so many parties involved here. But the approach of government is very important. If you jump in, sorry to say, I mean, I've seen government jumping in and try to carve out the rules, I mean, from their own personal perspective, I mean, that could be a disaster sometimes. Let me share with you. For example, like in Malaysia, we see Ministry of Transportation comes in, Ministry of Human Resource comes in, Ministry of Information and Multimedia comes in, and everybody kind of feeling like I have something here that I need to regulate. So what we are worried is that if they work in isolations, I mean, if there's not enough engagement with the providers, with the players, I think we might end up stalling progress. So my perspective is that we need to sit down together. There should be a common open discussion and understanding how things work, and to be fair to all. I mean, you want to be fair to the government, you want to be fair to the consumers, you want to be fair to the workers. I mean, a lot of issues being raised in terms of their safety, in terms of their social security, in terms of the rights and so on. Those are also important, and definitely I subscribe to the idea that whatever that we do not want to stall the progress. We want to find a way so that we can encourage more innovation, more innovative ideas in terms of to expand this further. And again, even classification wise, is yet to be certain. How do you classify these people? In Malaysia, when you talk about informal economy, generally it refers to kind of a roadside kind of, all those people who are selling cakes and so on along the road. So how do we classify this? I think those are important, and I really hope that we will be able to put things together. We seriously need the cooperations of the players themselves, to be involved with us and sitting together. And well, at the end of it, everybody get a cake. Everybody, I like Andrian mentioned that at the end of it, we must make sure that everybody happy. Happiness is above all. At the end of it, the well-being is better. Everyone is happy. So it's a very simple word, but that's the ultimate of it at the end of it. Yeah.
Professor, and I think it's important. You reminded us that a lot of governments in this region are grappling with this issue of platform economy on top of their difficulty already in dealing with what was existing in the informal economy. We have rampant informal economy. Now we have a platform economy, which in a way exacerbates or grows the informal economy even bigger. So if the governments were already struggling to deal with informal economy, now we have this additional layer. But we will get there. I do believe we will get there. And it's through tripartism and these sorts of dialogues that involve all of the partners that will get us there. Now, unfortunately, we are short on time, so I'm going to ask one additional question. I'll start with you, Professor Aslan. So this is about the future. Now, if you were to look into your crystal ball and let us think about how you see the platform economy evolving in the Southeast Asian region over the next 20 years, what do you think? Do you think it will continue to grow? What will the workforce look like? And how will this workforce be looked after?
Yeah. I just completed a study looking for Malaysia, looking into what's next after the pandemic. Very much of our focus is on the pandemic. I start to put the idea that there will be a major change in the landscape of the economy of the future. With respect to the gig, I think broadly I will say like this. I think what is informal today will be the formal tomorrow. And I think it will be a major shift. There will be a lot of changes in the future. The government, the consumers at large, the workers, talents, the kids that we are attending schools today, the business owners. Honestly, this is a tsunami of things. But I hope that it can be turned into a good tsunami. And we want to make sure that it at the end of it, adding to the welfare of human beings, good for the planet and good for everyone. And I seriously believe that this will stay and this will flourish. We need to be attentive in looking at it. And again, coming from government, I really, really urge all government to look at it seriously. Do not rush into putting in rules and regulations, engage, and engage. Thank you.
Right. Right. That's exciting. I mean, I think I love your optimism, and it is an exciting time, and we will be seeing some changes very, very quickly as governments stand. Well, not too quickly, as you mentioned. Oh, Yuhang, what do you think? What do you think the future for the gig work will look like?
Well, I think for me, we haven't really seen the evolution. I mean, the story has not yet been fully written, right? In fact, I think we are kind of in act one of a long play. And so I think in terms of sort of government and role of government, one, I don't envy that because it's a very, very difficult job. And I think part of the responsibility of us as a platform is to explain what gig work is better and more with governments. I think that's number one, because I think there is going to be a lot more that comes. So for me, there's three keywords, right? One is regulate, which we talk about how governments need to regulate gig work and understand gig work to regulate it. And I think, again, ILO with its work on really getting the details and the richness of it, it's critical to this process. So regulation and appropriate regulation. But I think what often is missing is also this think about partnership and innovation, right? Partnering with platforms such as ours, partnering with unions, with worker representations. I think we can find things in which we can innovate with and learn. In the tech world, we have this approach of agile, right? Where you try something, it doesn't work, you pivot, you try something new, you learn, you improve. It's something that we find it's quite hard to do with governments because they want to kind of set a regulatory regime and keep it there for 5 years, 10 years. But I think when it comes to tech, which is evolving so fast with so much benefits, but also risks, it's good to innovate, find sandboxes, learn from it, and then regulate based on learnings of that. And we've seen examples in Southeast Asia where that's actually happening quite a bit. And I think we should do a lot more. So I think the to be lots to do, and I just we're very, very willing to fact yet, but we are also very careful to unleash potential that for this. I mean, it's a great time to be doing gig economy at this time.
It is. I echo your enthusiasm and your optimism, and the conversation it's such a fascinating conversation, and we're still at the very beginning of this conversation. So I will, with great thanks to the two panelists. Unfortunately, we will close. We are out of time. The conversation will certainly continue on regulation and many other issues that are of importance too, as we continue to see the evolution of the platform economy. Let me turn it back over to Ilaria to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really wonderful. So in this special edition of Grab Conversations, we have to scratch the surface of this pressing issue of gig economy in Southeast Asia. Thank you to the contribution of our leading thinkers from International Labor Organization, Uma and Sarah, and to those at the forefront of shaping the future of work in the Southeast Asia region, our speakers, Yuhang, Pandu, Adrian, Trevor, and Professor Aslan. Thank you all for sharing your honest insights with us today. Now, I was just thinking as I was learning from everybody that just by virtue of being on this webinar signals that we are all among the lucky, educated elites, right? Blessed by being able to be born under quite fortunate circumstances to even be here to discuss these things and live the lives that we do. Hence, I think it's important to remember too that we are discussing all of this from a posture of humility rather than superiority. We know that we don't have all the answers at all, but we would love to learn as much as we can so that we can contribute positively and effectively to the future of gig workers in Southeast Asia. I sometimes get chills, actually, even just talking about our region with twice the population of USA, with higher growth rate than China, with almost 400 million people still underbanked and waiting to mobilize and be included financially. Very young, tech-savvy population overall, ready to leapfrog with technology. The potential is just simply enormous, but so are the gaps. I do look forward to the day when, according to Professor Aslan just now, the informal economy can become formal. And that's why we're bringing everyone together here today to play a part, to be a part of this good tsunami. Now, on behalf of both GRAB and the ILO, I thank you all for taking time to join us today. This is just a start to this dialogue, and we hope you will join us at our next. Goodbye.